know if you have this experience where if you're doing anything all the time, it's not just, this, it could be, a job you have or something that you just are fully immersed in. No matter what you see, you always see it the same way. Like you see things that pertain to, your immersion through your eyes, and every story just gets framed around that. And so I thought I'd start today with a story because I think this story fits. It was not specifically written about this, but it really is a nice segue into what I want to talk about tonight. And it's an old story. I'm getting up there, almost 50. So we're working our way up there. And it was a story by H.G. Wells, and it's called The Valley of the Blind. And real quick, I'll give you the synopsis of it. But it's a story of a remote village in Ecuador in the mountains. And basically, this village got cut off from the world through some type of natural disaster. So if you can imagine, everything's just hunky-dory, everybody's living their life, and then there's a natural disaster and this area gets cut off. But what wasn't known was that the inhabitants of this village had a recessive gene that predicated them towards blindness, but it was recessive, so it didn't get expressed, and generally people didn't have blindness until it got cut off from the world. And then there was some intermarrying and some intermingling that went on, and that recessive gene started to become more expressed. And so what happened is people started to become blind on birth, and generation after generation after generation. Not only were they blind, but it got to the point where they had no eyes. And not only did they get to the point where they had no eyes, but the places where your eyes sit were not there. So if you can imagine this and start to think, like, imagine if you'd smooth, spaces where your eyes would be. And then it got to the point where the actual concept of sight had disappeared, right? Because you're generation after generation, you don't have eyes, you don't have even spaces where your eyes are, you don't have even the words to use to describe it anymore. So now we've got this context, and at the same time, many, many generations later, there was an expedition, so a mountaineering expedition, people traveling through the mountains, and it was led by a man named Bogota. So Bogota was an experienced mountaineer, and he was leading people through, and an accident, he slipped down the side of the hill, the mountain, and he got cut off from his group and he couldn't get back. So he was walking and exploring, and even though he had the skills to survive, and he did for months and months and months, and actually years, so he was distraught, and he started to come across what looked like a cave, and he walked through the cave, and he worked his way through and into this beautiful valley, and he started to see what appeared to be signs of habitation. But it wasn't like anything he'd seen before. He'd kind of see it from far back, and obviously he's getting excited, and he's running up there, and he just can't wait to meet people. He hasn't seen people in like 2 years. And he notices there's this crazy network of ropes all around, and there's paths that are all kind of carved out. He couldn't quite understand what was going on. So then he saw people, and he's, hey, over here, over here. And he noticed that they turned in his direction, but they weren't acknowledging him. So he kept walking up and walking up, and he got closer and he got closer. And when he got up, to his dismay and shock, not only were they blind, but they had no eyes. And so he tried to describe, himself to these inhabitants. And of course, at the first chance, they were a little bit put off. He was talking about, hey, feel these. I have these things right here, and I can see, and I can look up, and I have the stars and the skies. And this guy is like crazy. Because remember, they didn't even know what sight was. They didn't have the words for vision. But nonetheless, they thought it was kind of interesting. So they brought him into the village, and they introduced him to everybody else. And they thought, all right, well, we'll let this guy live with us. He's no harm. We've got an extra set of hands, and we can go ahead and he can join the community. And that was all fine until he started telling all the kids about sight and vision and all these amazing things. And now they were, okay, not only is this guy a little bit off, but maybe he's a little bit dangerous. We can't have people thinking, about all these weird things that don't actually exist. And so they said, we're going to ban you from the village. And he had to think about that and realize that he hasn't seen people in years, and where's he going to go? So he said, no, that's it. I'll conform. It's fine. I'll do what you want me to do. And he did. He did his thing, and he continued to live in the society, and everybody was happy. And then he met a girl and fell in love and said, man, I want to marry this girl. Well, it turned out the girl was the community leader's daughter. So this community leader already thought this guy was a little bit wacky, and He's trying to explain to him. He's like, no, but I can see, and the vision, you reach up and it's beautiful. And they thought, okay, no, you have to go. You have to go. You can't be part of the society anymore. And then last ditch effort, they got together with the elders, and the leader came back and he said, actually, you know what, you love my daughter. I really want this for you. I want you to be able to stay. I want this for her. We came up with a solution. We have these amazing surgeons here in the community, and what they're going to do is they're just going to remove these soft spots in your face that you call eyes, and talking about vision, and then this problem will be gone, right? We'll never have to worry about it again, and then you can conform. So we're going to do that tomorrow. This is your last day. And so had the final campfire of the night, and everybody went to their huts and their rooms in this village, and one last day, he walked up to the top of the mountain. He looked out over the valley, and he was kind of taking in all the beauty, and he thought to himself, wow, am I going to give all this up in order to be a part of this community? And moral of the story is, the end of the story, and this is actually the H.G. Wells version, he decided to give up actually having a community in order to keep his eyesight, but to wander aimlessly for the rest of his life alone. So why is that a story that relates to us here tonight? And the answer is, you're not obviously being asked to give up your eyesight, but in many ways, I would make the case that you've been asked to give up the vision that you have for your life, to trade that vision to live in the valley of the blind, if you will. You've been asked to conform in many ways, to do what everybody else is doing. And again, we're very focused on health, so I could make all of the analogies to health, but it's everywhere. And I see it. I have children. I've been working with people for over 25 years. And we're in this position where it's just easier and it feels good to be accepted by everybody else around us, but at what cost, right? Like, what are we trading off? And, not just for yourself. How many people here have kids? I always think this one really hits for me. Think about this and just really put yourself in this situation. Is it safe to say that your parents 20, 25, 30 years ago looked at you, little Stephanie, and they said, oh, I want the best for Stephanie? All right. We all look at our children that way, correct? Your parents also wanted that for you. And are you experiencing what they wanted for you right now? Think about that. And this is not an indictment of where we are in our lives. It's not to say, oh, you're doing something wrong. It's not to say, you're not having a great life. I'm simply saying, as a parent, if you look at your children, there's a certain desire that you have for them to have an amazing life. Understand that our parents probably wanted that for us too. And so if we're not striving towards that or experiencing it, and hopefully this hits home with you because it did with me, what are the chances, like the realistic chances, that our kids aren't going to be doing the exact same thing 30, 40 years from now, having a conversation like this, or thinking, well, I'm willing to give up my vision for my life, but I want the best for you. Do you see how that cycle continues over and over and over? And sure, I think the younger group of us here today are still excited about that life, and that's amazing. And hopefully today you can take away not just some action steps, but a new perspective on how you can apply these principles and start to create that life. But I know as we get older, we start to become more cynical, and we start to say, oh, well, my opportunity is gone. Let's really focus on the kids. But what I want you to think about is, there's a relatively good chance that your kids are going to be doing the same thing that you're doing right now. And the only way that changes is if you go ahead and change what it's like for you today. And so, if we look at, what we're doing here today, and number one, I want to tell you that I am far from a guru, and I don't have all the answers for you. That is for certain, but I do have a lot of experience. I've lived a life. I've had lots of success. I've had lots of failures. I have children. I've been married. I've been divorced. I've had businesses fail. I've had businesses succeed. So just know that what I'm sharing with you today is based on principles and guidelines. And yes, we've been able to take those and put them into a really digestible approach to crafting something that you want for your life. And I'll tell a story at the end. I don't want to give it all away, but just know that when I say building a great life, it doesn't have to be, maybe the life that you think. And I think in many ways, we're probably skewed quite a bit by social media, to see what other people are doing, what other people have, or what other people's experiences are. And we assume that that's what success has to look like. And it doesn't. And that's not what we're trying to get to tonight. And so start to ask yourself, why? Like, why are we not, accomplishing this? Why have we given that dream up? I think there's a longer answer to this. I think the easy answer is just distraction, right? If we were to really pare it down into kind of a simple way to think about, all right, why am I not living the life I want? And we often think about the effects. Oh, I don't have this. I'm not feeling this way. I don't look this way. We have to go deeper, and that's the goal tonight. I was looking up just interesting stats for tonight and social media use. So I did a study, and I'm not just blaming social media by any means. I use social media, and there's ways to use it that can be beneficial too. But the average use of social media is an hour and 40 minutes a day. It's 12 hours a week, right? I mean, that's 50 hours a month. But if you multiply that over the course of a long time, it was 158 days every 5 years that we're distracted on social media. But it's not just social media, it's also people, right? People in our lives that maybe shouldn't be in our lives or that we're allowing to be in our lives. And it's just the shiny penny. It's like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And yes, social media amplifies that experience. So we have to start to think about, how do we focus in on what we want? And that's really what this Dream Life project is about. We've taught this probably hundreds of times. We have 80 Life by Design offices all around the world teaching very similar principles. So just know this stuff does work. And the goal with it is this. And of all the things you see tonight, that word is the most important to me. The word you. I think the biggest challenge that we face is realizing that you are the most important person in your life. And that's hard for parents because I have children too. And to put yourself first is really, really challenging, okay? And some people would even say that's not okay, it's wrong, it's morally incorrect. I'm saying it's great to be a little bit selfish, not self-centered, but selfish. You can make a strong case that being selfish is going to allow you to be a better parent, it's going to allow you to be a better friend, a better partner, a better business owner, have a better life. But what I want you to get is, how do you craft that with you at the center of this? And then to answer the other question, which is, what do you want? Right? We get so distracted, I don't think we're really clear on what it is that we want. So I won't put people on the spot here, but if I were to ask people what they want, some of us are going to have a pretty clear idea of what that is, and that's great. Hopefully tonight it just reinforces everything you're doing, maybe gives you a few more tools or just a different perspective. For others, it might be the first time you actually thought about, oh, what do I want? Can I have that? Can I experience that? Why am I not getting that? Oh, I'm not worthy of that, or maybe I just shouldn't be allowed to have that experience in life. So I do think we have to ask that question. If I had to pare it down to what the answer most people give me is I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. And I think that's a great pursuit, but I do want to make a point. Happiness is not a cause, it's an effect, right? So the problem we end up with is if happiness is our goal, then we can get that effect very short term from a lot of different things. It's where a lot of addictions are driven from, right? Is this idea of I just want to be happy, I just want to be happy, I just want to feel good, I want to be happy. So I think happiness is a wonderful outcome, but let's be clear, it's an outcome, it's not a cause, it's an effect. And so first off, we just ask ourselves, this is tongue in cheek, but it actually is pretty realistic here. Are you happy? No. Do you want to be happy? Yes. Change something. Are you happy? Yes. Keep doing what you're doing. Am I happy? No. Do you want to be happy? No. Keep doing what you're doing. I really take a rational approach to building the life that I want. And I think that's what I want to share with you tonight. So when we built Life by Design, we built it on this premise that there are just very basic fundamental requirements to both be healthy physically and mentally. And so Think by Design is really 5 steps that meet those needs and requirements. Now, we talk a lot about the other ones: health, nervous system, structure, food, diet, training. Think by Design is about, well, what are the actual mental, psychological requirements for us to build a great life? And then you need to be able to apply those. So there's a formula we came up with. I mean, I'm sure we didn't come up with it, but I did come up with this. But I want us to talk about this exact one, this piece right here. So I think everybody recognizes you got to be consistent with whatever your actions are, and you need to be able to do them, over an extended period of time. But this is actually the missing piece, is the correct principles. So I'll give you a really easy example. Let's say you want to lose 10 pounds, right? I mean, that's a very common one for people. I want to lose 10 pounds. I go, great, what are you doing? They go, well, I'm on the treadmill 5 days a week. All right, so pretty consistent. How long have you been doing it? 5 years. Well, that's a long time. Are you getting extraordinary results? No. So something's wrong, right? They've really done the really fundamental steps that people assume they have to put into play to get something. But what is incorrect is they're just doing the wrong thing, right? This is the most important thing to understand, is there are correct principles that when you understand them and you apply them, they create leverage. They can amplify the effect of something. So I could take the same 5 years, 5 days a week, and I could swap out the treadmill with resistance training. And I guarantee you, you will get amazing results. If you strength trained and resistance trained 5 days a week for 5 years in a row. Why? Because it's a correct principle as it applies to building muscle. And you can take that same principle, same concept, and apply it to diet, right? Well, what are you doing? Well, I'm eating bread every day for 5 straight years. Are you getting great results? No. Why? Well, it's not your consistency. It's an incorrect principle. If I just swapped out bread with protein and you'd get amazing results, it was simply just changing the principle. So what's the point? We have to understand the principles, right? If you understand the principles, you can put them into play. This is powerful because what happens, and I see it every day. I talk to patients every day. It's not working. It's not working. It's not working. Principles are principles. They always work. Always. Now, do we understand all the principles of everything in life? No. But the closer you can align yourself to what we know and put those into play, the more extraordinary the results are going to be. The other part of this formula is, if you're doing all these things and you've got that right, you should see signs of this. So if in your life, and we're going to use this in a second as one of the assignments, if in your life you're not seeing this or a trending towards that in any of the areas of your life, it's safe to say, if you're honest about this, I'm consistent, I've been doing it for enough time, like a week is not enough time, okay? If you've been doing things consistently for enough time and your results are not trending in the right direction, look here, right? Don't just scrap everything. Ask yourself this. And that's going to be one of our first steps. And that's, what do we believe? So I can tell you, all the action steps today, and I will. I'll share with you what I think is a great plan, a great set of, a great strategy to put into play. But you have to do this first. And I promised Ashley I would double my cup because I want to do this demonstration, but somebody already got in trouble for having shoes on, I think. So I don't want to spill water here on the floor, but I'm going to use that as an example. But my point is, one of the first questions is asking yourself, what do I believe? Like, what is my philosophy? And I'm not saying we need to, smoke cigars and have a discussion with, patches on our elbows and stuff philosophically, but we all have a philosophy. Like, we all have a certain way we approach life, certain things we think about, and a perspective on life. Sometimes the beliefs that we have end up clouding our action steps. And I'll give you some really clear examples. But before I can give you action steps, it's helpful if we change or at least address some potential beliefs. And, I always like this analogy. Actually, don't see that. If your cup is full and then you come into the office today and I start talking to you about, changing your beliefs and we're going to do this and we're going to add this exercise, what ends up happening is your cup just keeps going, right? Because your cup is already full. Like, you already have a way that you look at the world. You already have things that you believe. The challenge is some of the things that you believe right now, I'll be honest, they're not true. And I'll go back in my life real briefly. 2021, I was getting divorced. And, I married my high school sweetheart. This is going to be amazing, 10 years together. We were both away at school. We were both becoming corrective chiropractors. Like, it was just going to be the perfect life. And turned out that I was pretty oblivious to a lot of things that were happening in my life, thinking, everything was perfect and amazing. Long story short, I had to start this journey of asking myself, like, okay, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's some stuff in my life that actually isn't true. And so I had to start questioning a lot of my beliefs. Turned out that a lot of the things I believed about everything were incorrect. And so because I was aligning my life and my actions with what I actually thought was true, but wasn't true, I was not getting extraordinary results, specifically in my relationship. Okay? And so we start asking ourselves these questions, and then we ask ourselves, is it actually true? So I'll give you a great example. If I climb up on this roof and I get ready to jump off the roof, and I say to myself, I don't believe in gravity as I'm jumping. Okay? Does it matter if I believe in gravity or not? Or is gravity still going to affect me identically to the way it would affect Julie? It doesn't matter. My point is, and this can be kind of shocking to us, it doesn't actually matter what you believe in that sense. A principle is a principle. If something is true, it is true. All right? Now, I'm not saying I know everything, and there's definitely gray areas in life, but it'd be nice to understand things as closely aligned to reality as we can possibly get. You've heard me say, or seen me write in one of my 1,000 emails that I send you, reality exists. Like, we have to be aware that things are what they are. And if we pretend like things aren't what they are, then we're going to pay the price, right? And one of my favorite quotes is, you can avoid reality, right? Oh, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? You can avoid reality, but you cannot absolve yourself of the consequences of avoiding reality. You can't jump off the roof and say, I don't believe in gravity, until I hit the ground, and then things get broken, okay? So we have to ask ourselves, is what I believe true? And I'll give you an example of how this applies to your actual health and your life. Let's assume, this, by the way, is not an indictment of taking medication. There's a time and a place, all that stuff. I'm simply saying, I think we all agree, if your daily routine is taking a lot of medications, it's probably a sign that you're less healthy than you'd like to be. Yeah? And we can all agree on that first. So let's assume, though, your belief about health was this: in order to be healthy, I must take a lot of medication, right? Some people's belief system is, as long as I don't have a symptom, I'm healthy. And when I do, I'll go to the doctor and I'll get a pill, or I'll wait until I need a surgery and then I'll go get a surgery. If that was your belief, guess what your action steps around health would be? I would do nothing at all, right? Until I had a major symptom or a major crisis, and then I'd take a bunch of pills, or I'd get a surgery. Would we all agree that if that's your approach to health, you're going to be less healthy, right? The quick example I give people is, if I took, I don't know Ryan's case, well, I do, but this is not specific to Ryan. If I took Ryan's pills, I'm not saying anything. If I took Ryan's pills, would I be less healthy or more healthy? I'd be less healthy, right? I'm not saying there's not a time and a place, but the point is, if my belief was take a bunch of pills to be healthy and I wasn't healthy, maybe we should question the belief, all right? So think about it from another perspective, right? Money. People have weird beliefs about money, like really weird, super skewed. Everybody's got a real different perspective. I'll share with you mine. It wasn't always this way. I came from a very lower middle class family. My dad had 2 jobs. I mean, we walked uphill both ways to school, legitimately, because I went to the school on the other side of the main street. So I had to walk up and go both ways to school, uphill both ways. It's legit. But my point is, my belief about money was, money doesn't grow on trees. All the stuff my parents had told me. God bless my parents; they're wonderful people. They worked hard, and we had all this kind of life experience only because of the hard work they did. But my perspective on money today is very different. My perspective on money is it's an exchange of value, right? Your experience here at the center is a product of my belief about money. I believe that for you to have an amazing experience here, we're going to exchange value. But I take that very seriously. When you make a payment for your experience, I want to make sure that experience is exceptional, right? But if I believe that, money doesn't grow on trees, and only the filthy rich have money, all those things, the way I acted around providing service for my clients would be very different. We even teach this with our kids. So, for my kids, if my kids try and sell you stuff, I apologize, but that's just, they're walking around, I've got an apple I want to sell. I'm like, guys, that's not what I mean by exchange of value. I'm like, scribble a picture on the paper. I want you to pay me for this. But that's kind of the mentality, is create value. My point is, if your belief system is skewed, your actions will follow. All right. And then I use the example of relationships. For some people, they think, relationships are easy. I don't know what relationships you're in. Um, but when I believed relationships were easy, my results were not extraordinary, is my point. When I decided that, well, maybe the reality is relationships are hard and that's okay. And they require effort and they require attention, they require work. Like health. Health is not easy. It's not. It takes a lot of work for you guys to come here and be here, change your diets, and all the different things you're doing requires effort. But the outcome and the result justifies that you're following the correct principles and you're getting the results. So what's my point? My point is, if you are struggling in any area of your life, health, finances, career, relationships, doesn't matter. You pick it, find the area that you're struggling most. I can almost guarantee you that you have a flawed or faulty belief about that. Almost guaranteed, because for me, anytime I'm struggling in an area, instead of saying, well, what's so-and-so doing, or what's the world doing, or why can't I, succeed? My question is, what am I thinking? Like, what am I thinking that might not be right? Like, do I have a flawed perspective on this one thing? And it's almost always, and maybe you've had this experience, when you get a perspective change, then you see things differently and you realize, oh, I just had the principle wrong. Especially if you're a hard worker and you really have a great work ethic, it can get frustrating because you're a hard worker. You're like, man, I'm doing it, but I'm not getting the result. Go back and ask yourself, okay, maybe I need to look at the principle here. Maybe I've got something incorrect. One of my favorite quotes, and I read this 20 years ago, was that, true discovery is not seeing new lands, it's seeing the same lands, but with new eyes, right? Just having a different perspective on things. And hopefully we can bring that to you. So, the first step in this Think by Design approach, and you're going to get all kinds of resources, an ebook, all kinds of stuff. Whether you do any work or not, that's entirely up to you. I can say it's led to a lot of major successful improvements in my life, and I hope you'll do the work. What I want you to get, and this may be the most important thing I tell you, other than the word you, is that the second part is you have to then get clarity on what you want. This, to me, is the hardest part. Because most people want what they have been told that they want, what their partner wants, what their parents want for them, what social media tells you want. And we haven't allowed ourselves to just be okay with whatever we want, right? No judgment at all. But how do you decide? How do you figure it out? Because we talked about the distraction. The solution to what we're talking about tonight is focus, right? Having the courage to focus in on those things that you want most. And be okay with focusing in on those, even if it's not what other people want. So how do you do this? Well, you start here. You have to identify your values. We're going to talk about that very briefly. Once you have values, sure, then you'll know what to do and then you'll get results, right? You've maybe heard this before, but be, do, have. You don't have, do and then be. This one sounds, once I have $1 million, I'll do that thing I was going to do and then I'll be a good person, right? Once I lose 10 pounds, then I'll start working out, right? We have this story we're telling ourselves where we're like pleading with the universe to just give us the result first, and then we'll go and we'll do the work and we'll be the person that it takes. The simplest answer when a patient says, how do I lose 10 pounds? And I could talk about the protein and the weight training and all that stuff, but the real answer, become the person who will do the work to lose 10 pounds, right? Not to sound cryptic, but if you're not the person who's going to show up, who's going to make an investment, who's going to come, at 6 a.m. or at 6 p.m. and after a long day of work, if you're not that person, then the first thing you have to do before you come here is you have to start working on being that person, right? Building that part, because when you get that, the doing is really not that difficult. And I think anybody who's started the process will attest to that. Yeah, the first couple of workouts might be tough, or making 2 or 3 checkups a week, or changing your diet. It's hard at first, but if you're the person who's, desiring a result, you'll do the hard work. But if you're not the person, there's nothing I can tell you. Like, it's taken me a long time to get that, because I really do care about people getting the results. And sometimes I care more about people's health than they care about their health. And that's been difficult. And I've had to really let go of that. But I did realize that unless the desire is there and the person is that person who will do the work, you can lead a horse to water, as they say, right? So how do you use these values? And let's talk about values. I love this principle. I'll see people who were part of my original practice in London, started over 20 years ago, and that time you did the talk and you talked about the doorman, they'll still talk to me about this. So I'm excited to share this concept with you. What's a value? A value is something that you would like to gain or keep. Why is this important? Well, a value would be health. It's a great example. Financial abundance, career improvements, relationship development. These would be values. What I'm saying is they are the core of deciding what you want. So when people go, I want a new house, I want a new car. Most people don't want any of those things when they really get into the core of what they want most. But if you learn your values and get clear on those first, the what you want is actually quite easy. And once you start to identify your values, the what, it'll just literally that's what I want, right? And it's not a private island. It's not like a huge diamond ring. It's not all the things that people assume they would want. Like if I gave you no restrictions at all, so you can have anything you want, no restrictions at all. Your first thought isn't, I want a 27-room mansion on a private island. Nobody's thinking like that. There's just other things that will make you happier. We need to get deeper so we know what those values are. So again, values could be health. You can just Google values list and you'll get a whole bunch of things. And my advice is, and I write this in the ebook, just start to pare those down to the 4 or 5 or 6 things that are really most important to you. I think I have mine here. We'll come back to that. My life. My life is the most important thing to me, right? Call me selfish. That's okay. My kids are extremely important and they're the highest value other than myself. But if I'm not here, I'm not going to be a very good dad, business owner, husband. So I've got to take care of myself first. Health, family. Again, I think a lot of us are going to have similar values, but it's not always the case. You might have a partnership where husband, wife, or partners have different values. That's okay, right? You can support each other's values because your partner might be a value for you, but you don't have to have identical values. My wife likes to dance. I hate to dance. That doesn't mean I'll never dance because I love my wife and I value her, right? My wife doesn't like to golf. I love to golf. She'll come golfing sometimes. Get what I mean? Okay, so again, to go back to this, how does that work? Once you know your values, and this is really, I think, powerful, start to use them to make decisions in your life. So, for example, it's probably safe to say almost everybody in this room, consciously or unconsciously, has health as a value, right? It's how you ended up here. Now, your idea of health or your definition of health may have changed since you've been here, and I hope that's the case and we can keep evolving that. But your value about, I want to feel better, I want to function better, whatever that looked like for you, that's how you ended up here. If you didn't have that value, you wouldn't be here. You definitely wouldn't be here at 7 o'clock on a Thursday night, even if I told you to be here. And you probably wouldn't be making your appointments and your workouts and all those different things. You want to surround yourself and your life with people who have similar values. Again, not identical. And the analogy we use a lot is a doorman. So I want you to imagine your doorman has a list of all your values. All right. And then, Ashley shows up and she says, I'm here to see Jamie. And the doorman says, give me your values. And they go, oh, they're similar. Come on in. Oh, actually, they're not similar. You're not going to be able to get in today. And that's hard and difficult to create those boundaries. We've seen it in our businesses. I had an original gym in London. We brought somebody on who definitely didn't match our values because we thought we needed him because we were busy and we were in practice and he was a coach. And in the end, it totally got dissolved. It went to like a legal situation. And I call that the stupidity tax. And I paid that tax because I chose an opportunity over a value. I would say if you look across your life, and I see people shaking their heads and nobody needs to tell their stories. If you look across your life, all your failed relationships, failed, jobs, friendships are probably a case where there is a mismatch in values, right? And sometimes that's actually reassuring to think, oh, that person wasn't a terrible person. Right? That wasn't all their fault or all my fault. We just had different values, and that's okay. And so I think we need to give some consideration to filling our life for the vast majority. I know the question always comes up, what about family? And, that's a whole other story. But again, filling your life with people who have very similar values to you and being more conscious of how people in your life are allowed in or out and what those boundaries can look like. Now, what do we do with our values? So let's say your values are health. And this is when we get into the nitty gritty. Let's say our values are health. You need to then apply that value somehow. One of my favorite statements, and one of my favorite authors actually, she's an author, Ayn Rand. I don't know if anybody's heard of Ayn Rand, but she wrote a book called Atlas Shrugged, probably the most pivotal book. Jean-Marc read it, and it's just changed my life in many ways. It's about this thick, so whether you want to read that or not, or listen to the audiobook, I'll give you the Coles notes. Essentially, her statement was that happiness is the emotional reward for pursuing your values. I love that. Think about that. I already said happiness was an effect, right? I think having happiness as a goal in life is wonderful, but it's going to be an outcome. It's not going to be a cause, right? So if we want to feel happiness and have the emotions of happiness, which who doesn't want to feel happy? The way that occurs is by going deeper and saying, all right, how do I cause happiness? Well, I pursue the things I value most. And the things I don't value, I don't spend time and energy on those. Right? I mean, we'll use a health example. If I have type 2 diabetes, I want to solve that problem. I don't just take a bunch of medication. I got to get to the core of that, and I got to move. I have to build muscle. I have to change my diet. Same thing. If I want to feel happier, I can't just go manipulate that with a medication or a drug or some other addiction. I have to get to the core of it. Well, what's the core? Pursuing the things you care about most. So I want you to think about your life right now and say, when am I happiest? Right? When am I the most happy? I bet you, get a kind of time and experience in your head, that connects almost identically with the thing that you care about. Right? Maybe it's time with your kids, maybe it's working out, maybe it's playing golf, maybe it's whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that when you feel happiness, you are pursuing a value. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we can consciously figure out what those are? So we're not just living our life and then every now and then we're like, oh, I feel really happy right now. Right? How do we reverse engineer that experience? Now, one of the tools that can be really helpful is you can also think about when you feel the least happy. So you can use what's called an anti-value. So for me, if I'm doing paperwork, I'm constantly like, oh, I just despise doing the paperwork part of things, right? The administration. And I know that is not a value for me. But if I give that same paperwork to Ashley, she has the biggest smile on her face that you could ever imagine because she values that, right? And so we have those experiences. What we want to do is make our understanding of our values more conscious so we can spend more time on those and by default feel happier. Now, the other thing you'll do with values are you will build your vision. See, when I say, what do you want for your life? It gets tough because you're like, I don't know, I want this. And, maybe I want a trip or a vacation, but you've got to get behind it and say, well, why do I want those things? So when you know your values, you'll start to then have an easier time building this. You see, for me, our vision to build Life by Design came from my values for freedom, my values for health, my values for helping other people. And so I was able to, craft this vision that I've been working on, honestly, I had my practice started in 2003. So I've been in practice, well over 20 years, which is like mind-blowing to think. And lots of ups and downs and challenges, just like all of you in your life. And, in terms of a vision, it's a direct descendant of my values. And if you start to figure those out first, honestly, everything from this point forward is so easy. Right? It's the values that are tough and it's the values that are difficult to apply. I'll give you a real quick example. When COVID happened, one of the first things that I realized like 3 months in, one of my big values was freedom. I was like, oh my gosh, this feels terrible, right? I mean, running businesses in COVID was insane. And I mean, for anybody who went through that, it was like getting punched in the face every single day, trying to, traverse your way through. And I realized I want to do, I sound like a baby. Like, I want to do what I want, when I want, where I want, with who I want. And that's what I wrote down. So I realized that freedom was a much bigger value for me. And it got to the point where we were leaving Canada. Like Dr. Steve was taking over the practice and we were going to New Jersey. My wife's American and we're trying to make all these changes. My point is we took extreme action that aligned with my values and I was very happy doing it. All right. So knowing your values will lead you to your vision. And from there, then it's just fun. Like this is the fun part. All right. Well, what do I want? What do I want with my life? The challenge, and I'm going to throw this out there. If you try and do this without knowing your values first, the risk you take is creating a vision that is not yours, number one, or not tied to your value system, which means when it gets difficult, you're not going to do it. You're just going to give it up because it sounded like a really cool vision when you painted the idea of, we're going to have these businesses and things are going to be great. And, everything was wonderful, except when it wasn't wonderful. So when it's not wonderful or life is really, really hard, if it's not a deep connection to your values, it's why when your kids are sick and they're throwing up all over the place, you're like, oh, are you okay? But if it was somebody else's child, you're like, oh, right? One's part of your value system and the other one isn't. And that's okay. That one has parents that they can take care of that child. So you have to have your vision deeply connected to your values. Otherwise, you're not going to do the hard work. So what do I want? You're actually going to get a tool. If you're super into organization, the tool we use is called the Perfect Life Planner. Now, if you just like paper and pen, that's great too. All I'm saying is to start the process of contemplating this and coming up with some action steps in all the areas of your life, relationship, health, career. If you don't know what you want, it's really mind-blowing that you think it's going to happen, right? I'm going to get healthy. Well, what does that look like? I'm not really sure. I'm going to be successful with my career. Well, what does that look like? I don't know. I want to have a great relationship. Well, what is that? I don't know. I just want to be happy. Just want to be happy. You have to be willing to go deeper and really clarify what you want. Now, you don't have to do what I'm doing. I'm simply saying, this is my health objective. And right into the details, like I want to do this. I want to look like this. I want to work out this many times. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what mine is. It matters that I've taken the time to write it down and to be clear on it. And guess what? It's changed about 1 billion times. So it's not about being perfect either. It's just about being clear. Like, here's what I want today. So I can set my, true north this way for the next 90 days. And I like 90-day cycles. And I'll tell you why. If you think about a 25-year vision, right? That's daunting. Where am I going to be in 25 years? What's that going to look like? It's really scary. But every 90 days is 1%. Right? Think about that. Every 90 days is 1% of a 25-year vision. So you can accomplish a lot if you're just trying to go 1%. But if you do that every 90 days, you're going to accomplish what you've set out. In fact, I will make the case that if you truly follow through with this, you'll probably accomplish the vast majority of what you set for yourself long before 25 years. Right? It's natural for us to far underestimate what we can do in 25 years. And, the attestment to this is every one of us in here, or at least a large group, probably has a list for today of about 10,000 things, right? Show me your list of things you want to do. It's like 1 million things that you're going to do, maybe one of those. But if I say, show me your vision 25 years from now, if you even have a list, it's only got like 3 or 4 things on there. So we overestimate what we can do in today, but we underestimate what we're capable of 25 years from now. We need to reverse that. We need to overestimate what we can do in 25 years and then just figure out, well, what's the one single thing, which is actually a question on my whiteboard. It says, what's the one thing that I can do today that will move the needle? And every day I have one thing. I mean, I have a long list too, but I have one thing that has to get done. Today was prepare for Think by Design. That was it. If I get that done today, my day was a success. Tomorrow's taxes, right? So one thing has to get done on that day. And then you can start to map that out. What do I want? And we can reverse engineer that. Number 4, we've talked about your philosophy, thinking about what you believe. We've talked about having values. We've talked about vision. Number 4 is the toughest one. It took me a long time. There's a great book if you're looking just for resources on this stuff. So number 4 is purpose. What's your purpose? That's difficult. That was elusive for a long, long time. A great resource is a book called A Man's Search for Meaning. You've heard of that book by Viktor Frankl. So he was I believe a psychologist or a neurologist, and he was detained in the Holocaust and multiple, concentration camps. Ended up surviving the Holocaust, and he wrote a book talking about, everything can be taken from you except your final freedom, which is your ability to choose what you want. And he said that was the difference between people who survived the Holocaust, outside of obviously external forces that were out of their control, but people who survived it mentally and people who had succumbed to the stresses and the strain and, the obviously circumstances that they were under. So for me, purpose, as I said, is about freedom, and not just creating freedom for myself, but creating freedom for my family. And now I'm seeing why we wanted to build Life by Design. Is we want to create freedom for other people, health freedom, feeling great, living a great life, starting to identify your values. And I think what you've seen for people who've been here a long time or a short time, and you look around this community, it's pretty astounding. And sometimes I have to kind of pinch myself a little bit. It's a very thriving, exciting community in this little town of Blenheim on the main street. It's this headquarters for Life by Design. We've got all these locations, but right here are literally 1,000 people who are striving towards these goals. And I'm only saying that because it happened over 25 years because I decided that's what I wanted, because that was core to the vision and values that I had. So I'm going to take you through the detailed plan, and this is the final piece. And as we go through this, I used to do this presentation. I would always think my goal was, to leave people inspired and to always have a standing ovation at the end of the presentation. And then I realized that was about me feeling good about what I was presenting. Now I realize the goal is for you to leave with this kind of look on your face that says, what the heck? What am I going to do next? I was just really happy in my ignorant bliss, conforming. No, my goal is for people to really have to think about these things and to start doing the work, as we like to call it. So here's a plan that I think can work for you. I like to call it the Dream Life Project. So here's what I think the steps are. Once we've done the work of identifying our main values, now you can probably see that this is probably more of a full day workshop, but I'm just giving you the basics, and then you're gonna have to go do some of this work. Step one is identifying those values, starting to clear out some of the belief systems, and then start to paint the picture of what it is you want. Once you've got that, then you have to reverse engineer this and just ask simple questions like, well, what do I need to accomplish in the next 90 days? Just 90 days from now. And not goals-wise, not I need to lose 10 pounds, right? That's not what we're saying. The question is, what behaviors do I need to implement? What habits do I need to create right now? Now, for some of you, it might be I need to find an expert who knows how to do X. Good, go find the expert, learn, then the next 90 days you can do the action steps, right? It's very baby step and incremental, but make sure it's connected to the outcome you're trying to work towards. Once you have that, then you've got to get into the nitty gritty, like the real, tangible, here's what you're going to do. I think one of the big first things, and hopefully I don't scare you guys, create a schedule. For some people, that's terrifying. Right? They're like, what? A schedule? I don't want to have a schedule. I like the freedom. Knowing what you're doing and why, I'm not saying every moment of every day down to the second, simply saying knowing what you're doing and why, and that it's tied to the things you care about, is extremely freeing. All right? We talked about the distractions, an hour and 40 minutes on social media a day. Maybe you could put 30 minutes into your schedule. Social media scrolling, that's okay. I'm not saying don't do things like that. I'm not saying don't play video games. I'm not saying don't play sport. Just have an idea of where those things go in your schedule. All right? So again, I'm not saying how to do this. There's a million ways and strategies and time blocking, and there's all these other principles you can do, but I know where I'm supposed to be tonight right now. I know where I'm going to be tomorrow. I'm coaching the 6 a.m. class if anybody's coming. I'll be there at 6 o'clock. I'll be there at 5:30. I know where I'm going to be on every single day. The next thing, and this is also a scary thing for people, have a budget. I know we're not talking about finances today, but it is an extension of all these things we're talking about. Talk about this with all of our businesses. Know your numbers, right? Run your life like it's a business. Know your numbers, right? The reality is things cost money. So know your numbers. Decide, though, how those resources that you have, right? Money's an exchange of value. How do those resources get applied? And are they being applied to the things that I value the most so I can get the results I want that are going to drive me forward to the goals that I have so I'm going to feel the happiest? It's probably shocking for most people, probably me included, for how much waste there is day to day without paying attention. One of my mentors had always said, if you pay attention to your pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. Now, I'm not saying I'm looking at every penny, but I am saying I know my numbers. Know your numbers. Have a budget, right? Build into that budget allocations towards things that you care about, things towards, things you value, whether it's fitness or travel or friends. Just have some kind of structure around that. And then you need to have some type of planning, auditing, ritual, or rhythms in your life, right? What are some basic ones? Who looks at their list of things to do every night or in the morning? Right? You have a general idea. Like, I look at my stuff, I'm like, here's what I'm going to do today. Okay? Daily planning. I'm a morning, do it in the morning over coffee. Some people are, I'm going to do it before bed, whatever. I think a daily routine is great. Once a week, I spend 15 minutes. I look back at the week. I go, how'd it go? Was it good? What I get done? What I didn't get done? Cross some stuff off my list, right? Add some stuff to my list. Figure out what days they're going to go on. Every 90 days, for all of our businesses, we sit down and we have a strategy session. We spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with my team. We talk about stuff. We also, and this was powerful for personally, my wife and I started doing this. We get a babysitter, we get somebody to watch the kids, we go for lunch, we bring our notebooks, and we talk about what are we doing in these next 90 days, right? What do we have on the schedule? What are our goals? How do our finances look? Are we taking any trips? Can we afford to take those trips, right? What do we do with the kids? You need to have a conversation about these things on a recurring basis, just like you would in your business structure. And then once a year, I think it's really powerful to do some annual planning, goal setting, right? Reverse engineering. All right, well, this year we're going to renovate the house, or we're going to work on a rental property, or we're going to go to school, whatever it is. You can't just dream stuff up today and then expect it to happen tomorrow, right? There has to be some planning. And, you know, the part that I think is important with this, everything you do that takes you away from the things that you care about most, those values, is slowing down the process of you moving towards the values that you have. It's a distraction, right? I mean, I think I have that as a quote. I read this and it was just like a punch in the eyes. And I'll end on this, and no standing ovation, just do the work, okay? This, to me, this is it. You need to have the courage to eliminate everything that doesn't directly feed what you really want. That is hard. That is hard. There's so much distraction. And if you don't know what you want and you don't know why you want it, it's so easy to get sucked in, right? To other people's stories, to the TV show, to the Super Bowl, to social media. And again, no indictment of any of those things if you are intentional about that. I'm going to watch the Super Bowl. It's in my schedule, okay? It's going to happen. But I'm not going to spend an hour and 40 minutes on social media. That's not in my schedule. That's not going to happen. And so this is challenging. And I'll leave you with this story. I said I would tell you this story at the end. And then Ashley's going to send you all kinds of resources. And you'll either do the work or you won't do the work, or you might do some now and some later. But again, just start the process, okay? And hopefully I'll always be that little, whatever, angel on on your shoulder, just tapping you, saying, is this what you really want? So it brings me back to my dad. So in 2019, my dad passed away. And it was unexpected, use the air quotes. It's one of those things where he wasn't really following all the guidelines and rules that I had laid out for him to follow. He did well to a degree, but maybe not desiring or having a value system that matched mine. Nonetheless, he left way too early. He was 69 or 70. But I saw him that day. So he came into the office. He was actually coming from playing hockey. And then he was going to a funeral. And he was going to do something that really matched his values. This is why I was thinking of this story today. He was going over to the Legion, and he was doing a mini presentation. They wanted to charge money to the Blenheim Blades to use their kitchen for a fundraiser. My dad just didn't think that was right. It just morally didn't sit well with him. And my dad was not a speaker. Very few words would ever come out of his mouth. So the fact that he would do that was aligned with his values. Now, unfortunately, he was probably stressed to the gills. And in the middle of his presentation, he had a heart attack. And that was that. And so, I get it. Things happen. But when I look back at my dad's life, and this is what I want you to get, he was the most content person that I've ever known. But he didn't have a bank account. He didn't have a cell phone, right? If my mom would have said, hey, the kids are on FaceTime, I don't even know what you're talking about. He drove a truck with a hole in the floor. We had like pizza boxes legitimately on the floor in his truck. Still doing concrete, still doing, work. But my point is, he was more than happy to hang out at Charlie's. to play with his grandkids, to play golf 5 days a week, to skate 3 times a week in the wintertime. And I only say that because when you're deciding what your values are, don't judge those values for yourself, right? Your values don't have to look like 50 businesses and traveling the world and having $1 million. Like, it doesn't have to look that way for you to be successful. In fact, I'd make the case that if you accomplished all those things, but those were things you didn't actually want, that you would be the opposite of successful. And in my dad's case, he was the most content, happiest person, had no desire to do anything other than what he was doing. He was doing what I said. He was doing what he wanted, where he wanted, when he wanted, with who he wanted. Okay? So be relentless in your pursuit. I believe that pursuing your values in order to feel the emotional reward of happiness is a worthy journey for you. You're going to get all the resources. And then whether you start that process or not, I sure hope that you do, because nothing will be different if you don't. And of course, if you do, then this is your life to live. So go for it, guys.